Hey everyone, this is Ian Carlin from the Empty Cup podcast. I am here today in studio, well, via the internet with Chewy from Jitsu. He is not quite on yet, so I'm going to talk for a little bit. But you are in the world, obviously, where traditional and non-traditional martial arts collide. And again, like I said, today we're in the studio with Chewy. Oh, not in a studio, but we're via the interwebs.
Yeah.
Chewy from Jiu-Jitsu. Thank you for joining me today. How you doing?
Thanks for having me, brother. I'm doing well.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I always like to start off our interviews with how you got started in the martial arts. Just want to let you know and let everybody out there know that I'm a big fan, and I reached out to Chewy and Jiu-Jitsu because just if you're a martial arts fan, you kind of float around on the internet, you look at YouTube videos, and as I'm developing my game in Jiu-Jitsu, I'm realizing that I'm having some some problems in some areas, and so it's easy to look up, okay, how do you get out of this, or what's a good way to get out of that? And I came across one of your videos on escape from side control when somebody's got a tight side control, and I've used that a bunch of times in rolling. So and a lot of your other videos as well. So that's how I found out about you. And you're one of these people that I can sit and I can watch like 4 or 5 videos in a row, and I'm like wondering where the night goes. Half hour goes by, I'm like, okay, maybe I had to spend some time with my family and get off the
Well, I'm glad it's been helpful, man.
Yeah, it has. And I think that's important, because I think people like you and me, when we put videos out, I have done some videos on ground, although I'm still relatively a beginner on ground, but I do, my Ronin JKD channel where I talk about stand-up martial arts. You kind of wonder if it's helping somebody, you want to know that this is actually affecting somebody. So just to let you know, it has, at least with me. So I'm sure I'm not the only one. But yeah, I have learned a lot via the internet from your teaching, and I benefited from it. So thank you very much for that.
Man, I appreciate it. And I'm sorry, is this, and I know this is sort of off the thing because we're doing this from home, is it picking up that lawnmower noise from our neighbor?
It's fine.
Okay.
Like maybe barely, but I can't hear it. So that
Okay,
way
cool.
I can hear like a
As long as it's
faint
not coming through
buzz.
too loud on your end.
No, not at all. So how did you get started in the martial arts? What was your evolution? When did you start thinking, well, I could use, I really like combat?
Yeah, as a kid, I grew up watching Bloodsport. That was I remember watching Bloodsport and seeing like Bolo Young like flex his pecs and seeing John Claude Van Damme do the splits, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so friends of mine, we would go out and we'd always like watch these martial arts movies that were really big back in the late '80s, early '90s, and then we would always go out in the backyard and beat each other up. And just fight. And then from there, I thought, well, man, I'd like to learn some martial arts. So I got my parents to enroll me into Taekwondo lessons. Did those for a little bit, and then I really didn't get into really deep into it until I started grappling in wrestling. And that's where typically wrestling is considered more of a sport than a martial art, but I sort of still lump it all together. And wrestling was when I really dove deep into something and really got sucked into it. And so from wrestling, it had the transition of high school wrestling, really like that. I went to college. The college that I went to did not have wrestling, so I started doing jiu-jitsu because I was really into fighting, and then just sort of went from there.
That's interesting. So at what point did you start taking jiu-jitsu?
I was 18.
Okay.
So I was wrestling in high school, and then I had been watching the UFC. I started getting back into it because at the time I graduated high school in 2003. And so, the UFC was starting to become big, and they were starting to kind of have a resurgence. And I was like, cool. So like, this fighting stuff, this looks like it would be really cool. And there was all these wrestlers fighting in the UFC. And I was like, well, maybe I could do this someday. And then when I watched it, I was like, well, if you're fighting, if you have takedowns, then you should probably have the ability to do submissions. And so I started doing jiu-jitsu lessons when I was 18. Now, before that, me and some friends, like we were like, 17, like 16, something like that. And we would actually train in my basement and try to like watch videos of stuff and pick it apart and try it on each other, and then like, do that kind of thing. But my first actual lesson from a coach was in 2003, May, when I was 18 years old.
And is that the same lineage you're with now, or did you
No.
switch up? You've switched
Um,
up
yeah, I
since?
switched up. So I was with that coach for several years. I ended up getting my purple belt under him. I switched to a new coach, and then I received my black belt from him, from Hanato. And then currently I'm in a different affiliation. And I switched affiliations back in 2014.
Oh, do you mind telling me what affiliation you're with, or?
Yeah, I'm with Sean Hammonds. So Sean Hammonds is located out of Nashville, and he has a big affiliation, especially within the sort of Midwest area. And we have
Mhm.
affiliates all over the place, but especially in the Midwest in this region, we have a ton of guys, and so it's really good to be a part of that. Where we'll come down and we'll have a meetup every year in February, and you'll have 200 people, just packed on the mats and stuff like that. So it's a lot of fun.
That's really interesting. It leads me to some questions here about like switching gyms, and when it's right, and
Yeah.
the training methods for each one. Because when I first started jujitsu, I came from it from Systema, and Systema kind of opened my eyes to ground fighting, and I started
Mhm.
really getting into it, Russian martial arts. And I went to a Gracie gym here where I lived, and the guy was a black belt under Pedro Sauer. Um, and he's a friend of mine that I've known for a long time. As a matter of fact, he's the very first person that I've ever had an encounter in jujitsu with. Uh, uh, Back when he was a purple belt in jujitsu, and I was an advanced student in Wing Chun, and he took me down and locked me out, uh, and I was humiliated. And because I was a black shirt, in
Sure.
Wing Chun, the school that I was in, it was white shirt, gray shirt, black shirt. And you
Okay.
think I would have learned, you think I would have been like, okay, I need to learn some ground stuff. I didn't. I just said, well, you know what? I need to learn my kung fu better. It wasn't until years later, and he's still here in town, and I studied with him for about 9 months. But his school shut down, and then there was another school that was kind of like an MMA school, but they had
Mhm.
jujitsu. And I had my coach on here before, and he was a black belt under in Walt Bayless jujitsu. So I switched over to him, but that wasn't, that was like not really a choice. It was just like one school kind of shut down, the other school opened. I'm thankful for that, but there's differences in the schools. Like
Sure.
for instance, in Walt Bayless Jiu-Jitsu, you learn leg locks from
Okay.
white belt right on, and
That's
in
good.
Gracie Jiu-Jitsu there wasn't, it was basically the combatives curriculum that I went
Right.
through. So anyway, talk a little bit about. Let me ask you this question first. How did wrestling influence your jujitsu game? Did it help it? Did it hinder it? What do you think about that?
It influenced it. I mean, one, it gave me a love for grappling, and it gave me the ability to sort of tell my body what to do. So, for instance, when I see people come into jiu-jitsu class who have never done a martial art, never really done a sport, they a lot of times have trouble telling their body how to do new things, right? So, for instance, I can take a person who's played like just wrestling or whatever, any sort of martial art, and then you take a person that hasn't trained a martial art, or a sport for that matter, and you have them do a shrimp or a hip escape. And the person that's done the sport, done the martial art, they can do it. After a couple tries, the other person's so lost. And so coming into it, I had the ability to tell my body how to do certain things. I was also very comfortable with the actual grappling aspect. It helped me in the fact that it gave me takedowns, and it gave me the ability to like grind and be intense and how to apply pressure. It hurt me in the sense because in wrestling, you're training for a season, right? You're training to, unless you're doing a camp in the summertime or something like that, when you're training in high school, you're training to get ready to beat someone in a tournament. And so really you only focus on a couple of things to get ready for those matches, and you just get better. And you're always trying to win all the time. And so when I came into wrestling, one, I didn't want to be on my back, which obviously that's what wrestlers always have trouble with. And I didn't want to use the guard because I thought it was, just didn't feel right. And I never wanted to lose. And I got super frustrated from when I would lose because, again, in wrestling, I never wanted to lose. And so it hurt me in jiu-jitsu because jiu-jitsu, I think, and in wrestling does to some degree too, it requires a lot of exploration. And I didn't have the ability to do that in the beginning because I was so resistant to the feeling of losing. And that hung on to me for a long time. And I didn't get rid of it until much later. But again, it helped me in the fact that it gave me the ability to really be able to grapple right off the bat. As soon as I walked in the doors, while everyone else is just trying to learn how to get moving, I was already able to put pressure, take downs, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I've noticed that, when wrestlers come through the door, they're already very good at, understanding how the body moves and
Mhm.
understanding pressure, understanding following the base, at least kind of maybe a little bit more of a simplistic view of it. Maybe
Sure.
not quite as developed, not quite as intellectually developed, but at least a basic understanding of, if you follow the base, you're going to control the person, you're going to control the fight.
Right.
So, I see that a lot. The problem that I see sometimes with wrestlers coming into jujitsu, and I don't know if you had this problem, was actually finishing. Actually learning how to do an armbar or a
Oh, sure.
triangle, or it's basically a matter of they just hold you down, and if you can kind of wait that strength out, you can kind of, because I had no background in wrestling
Mhm.
whatsoever. All my groundwork has either come from what little time I did it in Systema and then in jujitsu. But we have wrestlers coming in all the time because it's important to them. So did you have that problem? Did you have a problem when you first got in? Like, okay, I got him down, but now what do I do?
Yeah, I mean, it depends because like when I started, when I got into wrestling or jiu-jitsu from wrestling for mixed martial arts, I knew that I had to develop the ability to finish. And so I understood the value of, doing this. And also my coach, my original coach, um, there were good things and bad things. One of the good things was that he was a wrestler before he got into jiu-jitsu. And so he was like, all right, here's what you're going to do. You're always going to end up getting to side control because you take people down with doubles and single legs and you pass the guard. And then you get on top to side control and you do these things, and I didn't run into a lot of trouble finishing because of that. And a lot of times with my wrestlers that come into the gym, I just show them that, like, hey, listen, we're in side control now. Let me show you some stuff from side control and you'll be able to finish people no problem because again, they have the ability to control position so well from that angle,
Right.
inside control, that finding a submission is really not that big of a problem. Now granted, if you put them on their back and try to tell them to finish or try to finish from other positions, not so much, but inside control, it's very easy for a wrestler to adapt to the ability to finish. So
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
kind of show them that kind of stuff, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. So now you got to a purple belt in
Mhm.
your first school, and then you switched to another school, and then
Yeah.
you switched to another school. Was when you went from one school to another school, and you did they respect the purple belt from one school to another school, or was there some type of like, hey, I know you're a purple belt in this school, but over here in this school we do things differently? Was there any types of challenges from switching schools?
It was interesting. So I left my old coach just from some different differences we had on, just personal differences in the ways, and even with teaching and training differences. And when I left, I came to a friend of mine who I trained with previously, had a gym on the other end of town, and so I started training with him. And they had no problem with it because they were brown belts at the time, and I was a purple belt, and they were perfectly accepting with that. There was an issue where they brought this Brazilian coach in who didn't. I've talked about it in one of my videos where I came in and I think that there was some sort of like threatening feeling because he was trying to, assert himself over dominant over the rest of the people, I believe. And he used to say a lot of things in Portuguese that I didn't understand. And my friend who speaks Portuguese, right? One of the other coaches, he would later on tell me what he said. And I was like, oh my God, like, this is after the guy had already left. And so the guy didn't really like me. And so there was some incidents where, he, encouraged me to take my purple belt off, which I did, and was later he gave it back to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, there were some problems there, but from the coach, but he left. He was there for maybe 6, 7 months. And after he left, there was no problem whatsoever. The coaches never, had no issues with it.
Oh, okay. All right.
I know it's a weird, it's like a complicated thing. You know what I mean? So, it's just hard to explain sometimes.
No, yeah, I understand that because like I said, like I the first groundwork I was really exposed to that I really enjoyed doing, that I wasn't like poo-pooing, was from Systema.
Hmm.
And a lot of it was very Sambo influenced. And there were leg locks. We learned some leg locks. And I went to the Gracie school, and during the free roll time, I tried to flay on a leg lock. But one of the guys, he stopped me and he said, "We don't do leg locks here," you know?
Absolutely.
So I didn't know if that's a common problem, whatever, in other schools, because I've only been exposed to 2 schools of jiu-jitsu. So when I went from the leg locks in, getting rid of the leg locks in the Gracie school, at least until a more advanced one, they did have a knee bar. But then going into Walt Bayless, it was like, hey, no problem with leg locks. We don't care.
Now, did they ever say like why they were against leg locks?
No, this is kind of interesting because it wasn't like the teacher, the black belt, who said that they had a problem with leg locks.
Yeah.
It was one of the purple belts, and he said, "Boy, you could really mess up somebody's foot with that."
Sure.
So that was the thing. It was just like, and then plus there was the instructor who was a friend of mine, was, like I said, he's a black belt under Pedro Sauer, but he went to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and started teaching the combatives. So I think there was like an emphasis on the curriculum of the combatives. So I'm not sure what his position was on it. So, but I just laid the leg lock on, and they were like, well, we don't, that can really damage somebody's foot.
I mean, everything can damage someone in jiu-jitsu, This is the funny thing, man. Like, people and I understand, because I held the consistent belief back in the day. Because I mean, back when I first started training, if you held on, for instance, if you went to a tournament and you were passing someone's guard and maybe you sat back for an ankle lock, afterwards it'd be like, all right, can I cuss on here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
But I remember one time, one of the guys getting a leg lock, and one of the coaches afterwards going to be like, why couldn't you pass the guard, pussy? That kind of thing. Like, why didn't you pass his guard? Why'd you have to sit back for a leg lock? And, and so this was back in the day. And so we all thought that leg locks were evil. They were bad. You weren't supposed to do them. You only did them if you couldn't pass the guard. And then, especially back in, it was around 2010, 2011, where you had, especially at the Abu Dhabis, you had this explosion of everybody just getting heel hooked and leg locked. And it grew from there. And I know that at our gym, we started diving into the leg locks more and more. And, what I've noticed is the more and more you do them, the more and more you educate people, the more that you practice them and the more that you apply them and all that stuff. It's just like any other submission. I mean, you think about, for instance, an armbar or a kimura. Actually, I think one of the most dangerous submissions by bar none is a kimura. We take our most mobile joint and we're then attacking it. Like, you damage this thing, it's never the same again. And I've met so many people who have had like spazzy people put them in a kimura and pop their shoulder out, or damage it in different ways where they have to have surgery and things like that. And their shoulders will never be the same again because you're attacking this joint. And, just like anything else, when you apply a submission, it's always to get, especially in the gym, you get to the point where you could physically damage someone and then you stop. And a lot of times what I see is that when people don't practice leg locks properly or enough, they don't understand when that is. It's like a white belt who's given a kimura and he doesn't know the threshold for the tolerance for someone. But as you train more and more, you kind of know, okay, I get to this point, I apply pressure, and then you basically stop and you maintain control to give them the chance to say, you got me, tap. And so what I see from most people is that they don't understand, leg locks enough. And so they don't understand, oh, I'm caught. Like, for instance, when we, in training, like me and Chad, one of my black belts, if he catches me in a heel hook, he gets his legs laced through, he catches me and it catches my heel. He's not going to crank it and pop my ankle. He's going to catch it, demonstrate that he has complete control of my lower body. And then I'm going to go, oh, you got me. Let me tap. Not, okay, I'm going to keep fighting out of this because my upper body's free, my lower body's not, and then twist out of it and get something popped. You know what I mean? It's just like that. Right. I see people say how dangerous they are, but I'm like, everything we do in jiu-jitsu with joint locks can be potentially dangerous. It's all about the way that you apply it and the safety. So the more education, the early on, the better, I think.
Right. So you've made leg locks part of your white belt curriculum?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't let the brand new guys attack like heel hooks or anything, just because of the twisting motion. but I make sure that they practice how to apply them, and I make sure they practice the escapes so they know them, so that this way when they become like a blue belt or something, or when they become like a higher level white belt and they start playing around with them, it's not so foreign to them. They've been practicing them from the get-go. And they, again, straight ankle locks can be applied in a very safe manner. Knee bars can be. They can all be applied very, very safely. It's all about just knowing when you're caught, because that's the thing. Like a lot of times people like they'll get caught in a leg lock, and if they don't know, their upper body's still free. So they don't have that same sort of like, like if you do like an upper body submission, a lot of times the person's face is smashed down and they can't physically move, right? So they're like, you got me, I'm done. Whereas with the legs, sometimes you can have somebody's lower body like tangled up and they can't move their legs or hips, but they can move their upper body. So they still think they're in the fight. In reality, it's like, no, it's checkmate down there. Like, you lost already. It's time to tap. And so by educating those guys early on, as a coach, and I speak from personal experience, I've seen our incident of injury with leg locks just plummet. Like I remember back in the day, you'd have like a white belt that would see an ankle lock online. He'd put it on someone, and then the other white belt would twist out of it instead of going straight forward or removing the leg off hips or something. And they would end up getting knee injuries. Now we don't have any leg injuries because everybody knows kind of how to apply them safely and with control. And the other person knows, oh, hey, you caught me. Good job. Tap. Let's play again.
Right. Yeah. And, this is so important, and that is getting rid of the ego when you're rolling, because it's okay to tap. You're just learning. This isn't the fight yet. When you're on the street, don't tap. When you're in a competition, don't tap. But when you're in class, tap. I tap all the time. So I'm old. I'm 43 years old. So I'm doing this old guy jiu-jitsu thing, starting a little bit late when it comes to this stuff. So I have no problem. And I've been in martial arts a super long time, as my audience knows. And so like I've learned to get rid of that ego for the sake of learning. You don't get rid of the egos to be a loser. It's not like I get rid of my ego and now I'm a big loser. No, when you understand I get rid of that ego and I tap more often, I actually learn faster.
Sure. It's all about balance. You have to have, it's a competitive game, rolling. It's a game is what it is. It's a game that has beneficial sort of rules that, like, you get on top, you get control of someone, and you could protect yourself in a fight or competition or whatever. But it's a game at the end of it. And now with a competitive game, you have to have a little bit of an ego, a little bit of self, like you have to push yourself a little bit to improve. But at the same time, you have to keep it in balance and make sure that it doesn't like consume you to the point where you, like you said, you get angry that you lost or you get frustrated. You just have to use it to say, okay, I got caught. Let me improve upon what I was doing and make sure it doesn't happen again, rather than getting upset about it, or that letting it wreck your day because you went to the gym in the morning and one of your buddies caught you in the armbar.
Right.
It's good. Like, figure out why they caught you in the armbar and fix it.
Right. So doing this thing with switching gyms, the second gym you went to, did you go? I didn't quite catch it, so I'm sorry if you're repeating yourself, but did you make it all the way to black belt in your second gym, or was that till your third gym?
Yeah. So the last time I didn't actually switch gyms, I switched affiliations. And so basically, when I switched to the gym, I ended up under Renato Tavares, and under Renato and my coaches that were under Renato, I went to black belt. I got my black belt on July 9th, 2011. And following that, I switched to Sean Hammond's his affiliation. I was already the head coach and everything, and I switched to his affiliation in 2014. Renato he's a great dude. Or 2015, excuse me. The reason I switched was not because of like anything really personal. It was more of just like the proximity of how close Sean is compared to Renato. Like, Sean's like, a 3-hour drive. So like I can go down there and see my coach pretty often if I want to. With Renato, he's all the way down in Vero Beach. And so for me to get down there, I couldn't go see him very often. And for me at this point, like I've been coaching myself for a long time, and so I don't necessarily need someone to walk me by the hand, but I would like to have a relationship that's, with my coach on a pretty regular basis, with someone that I can see, in person. I can go have a beer with on a regular basis, that kind of thing. And so that was Sean.
So this is an interesting factor that I've experienced on both sides as a teacher and as a student, and I'm wondering how this factors into jiu-jitsu. Do you find, so you've been a black belt for 6 years now, do you find that your standards for your students kind of start to evolve as you evolve? So for example, I'm just, barely a
Yeah.
blue belt. And I was listening to this other black belt talk about how they used to evaluate their students. And they said, by purple belt, I should be feeling a little bit of a pushback,
Hmm.
But then he realized, well, look, I've been a black belt now for like 10 years. He goes, purple belts to me almost feel like blue belts at this point.
Right.
And so he realized that he kept raising his standards. So like it took, 3 to 4 years to get a purple belt. Then it took 5 to 6 years to get a purple belt. And he's like, I'm kind of not being fair here. Have you gone through that? Like, have you realized that, oh, well, maybe I'm getting good myself. And so the purple belts start feeling, and the brown belts start feeling a little, not quite like you used to remember them.
The way that we promote people, I have the final say on it and everything, but like I've never taken especially now, like once I had a big group of blues and purples and browns and all that stuff, I don't necessarily take the responsibility just to myself, because I think of it, as, if you're in the military, right, you have a general, you have colonels, you have this chain of command. And then when people are up for promotions, a lot of times it's, on the other people above them to say, hey, he's ready for this particular promotion. Right. And then this person says, okay. And so for me, I have a group of people that, like my coaches and my other purple belts and brown belts and things like that. And I'll say, like, hey guys, like, what do you think about, like, as far as like, who would you like to say is ready for a blue belt or a purple belt or whatever? Tell me who you think. I have another black belt coach, and I'm like, he's a full-time coach. And I ask him, I was like, who do you think's ready? And I compare them with who I think's ready. And then we go through it, and we have some other things like with from white to blue belt, we do white belt classes where we grade them on their basic knowledge and things like that. We make sure we cover gaps if they're not there. But, and then I roll with the guys regularly, but, I go through with the people that are rolling with them besides myself. I'm like, hey, what do you think about this person? And I get a kind of a consensus of, who's all in, like, who's saying this guy, like, for instance, we promoted one guy recently who had just been, he was doing great at tournaments. He'd been training really consistently. He was a really big guy who wrestled first before training. And so he naturally was good on top. And then he started working from his bottom game, and he would purposely pull guard on someone that was, that he would have trouble against, so he could work that position. And so it's like, okay, we all kind of all came to the, conclusion he's ready to go. So, because of that, I've never had the thing where it rested solely on my shoulders, where like my particular opinion was all it was, because sometimes people would say something about someone and I was like, oh, you're right. I miss that guy. And I don't want anybody to fall through the cracks. And so sometimes those people see people that I don't see, or they see them in a different way that I don't see them, just because of where I'm at personally.
Yeah.
So it's always good to have another set of eyes and ears out there.
Yeah, and there's so many factors when it comes. I mean, there are people that make I'm like they make me feel like a white belt again. Like my first day of class, and they're just a blue belt. And then there's other people who are blue belts that I feel like I do pretty good against.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like the factors are so wide, and I'm still, like I said, fairly new at Jiu Jitsu, but I understand the mentality as coming from other systems. Is like it's the same thing. So like, for instance, when I first got my black belt in the first style I ever got my black belt in, the White Dragon martial arts system, I was a red belt, which was one before black belt in that system. And my teacher was like, you're as good as the black belts from 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, then why am I not a black belt? Why are you putting, this kind of thing on me? Yeah. And anyway, so I know that thing that stuff kind of happens, where, and it's not consciously, it's not like, and I've done it to my students before too. It's just like, because they represent you,
Mm-hmm.
especially, blue belt's one of those, in my opinion, it's just like a beginner phase.
It's still a beginner belt.
Yeah, it's a beginner belt. But you slap a purple belt on somebody, they better know jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
You've got to. That's your name out there on the person.
Right.
And go ahead. Sorry.
No, you talking.
I just recently gave somebody an advanced rank in JKD, one of my students, and I was like, this means a lot. This means a lot. This is like a big deal, because as I give this person this advanced rank, you're representing me. You're saying I got my advanced rank in JKD from Ian Carlin.
Mm.
So it's like a big deal. I'm sure that you understand the pressure of that being a jiu-jitsu coach.
Absolutely. Well, and I think one of the things, if anything, that's happened since I've been a black belt and been a coach for so long. I mean, I've been coaching full time. I've been a full time coach like no other job since 2010. And so, like, when you go through that, I mean, what's happened more or less is the why of why I promote someone, you know what I mean? Like, has changed a bit because of my why for coaching. You realize that there's so many different paths that someone's going to lead. Like you said, you're going to have those killers that are going to competitions and they're just biting at the bit. And, it's a blue belt that'll give a brown belt a good run for his money. But then you have those people that are just there and they're there because for different reasons than that. And you got to make sure that you, as a coach, you take care of both of those people, you know what I mean? Because you don't want to say, hey, you're not going to go compete, so you don't get your belt, or you're not killing everybody on the mat, you're not going to get your belt. You got to make sure that you have some way to make sure those guys are taken care of as well. And you're absolutely right when you say like when I gave Chad his black belt recently, and like that's a guy like I watched grow up. He had a crossroads when he was a brown belt, because he was a young guy who had this amazing ability to basically just, I mean, he was a young kid who could beat up grown men, no problem, easy. And so it got to his head for a little while. He was very cocky, very arrogant. And he felt like his, desire was to, or not desire, but he felt like his responsibility was to get on the mat and just smash everyone. You know what I mean? Just like get after everyone. Didn't matter who it was, he was smashing you. And then, we talked one time and we started to talk about his purpose as a coach. Chad is a person that has been through the journey, right? He went on the journey. He went and accomplished these things. He's been to places that other people haven't. And then I was like, your job now as a coach is to say, hey, like I've been here before. I'm already up here. I'm here. Let me give you a line and pull you with me. And, as a brown belt, he really developed as a coach. And instead of it being smashing other people, I mean, he obviously does that when he needs to and getting ready for a competition or something, but he started to really build people up, and it's been really incredible. And that was like when I was, okay, cool. It's time to give his black belt, because as a coach, he's really, developed himself, and I can put my name behind that.
Right. Do you find, that people worry about belts too much, in jiu-jitsu, or, I'm sure there's a wide variety of people there, and some of them are those people that aren't concerned, and some of those people that are overly concerned, and probably a wide variety of them in the middle. What do you say to people about worrying about belts? And and let me just preface this by saying the reason why I ask about that is because I'm very goal-oriented person myself. And after I got my blue belt, because I was just like, with all the rest of the class, I was just like kind of like all the rest of the class, and I just kind of waited it out. Started being there for about a year, kind of felt a little bit like I'm like, okay, so I did 9 months at another school and went through the combatives on DVD. And then I've been here for a year and a couple months now. And I asked one of the assistant coach, I'm like, hey, I'm just wondering where I am. It's kind of like the squeaky wheel gets the oil kind of thing. You're not trying to push it, but trying to let him know that, hey, I'm interested. And after I got my blue belt, I went to the main coach. We have a brown belt coach and a black belt coach. We have actually a couple brown belt coaches and a black belt coach. And I went to the black belt coach and I said, look, I've been doing martial arts for a long time. I said, I'm in it all the way to black belt. I said, but I just barely got my blue belt. I said, I will not bother you about this. I will not even ask you about this for 2 years. But after 2 years, I might start asking questions. What do you think about that? What do you think about people who kind of obsess about belts?
For me personally, I was a wrestler first, so we didn't have belts. There was no such thing as a belt. It was just about like, what can you do? And so for me, in my first gym, we didn't even have stripes. It was like you get your belt and eventually you'll get your next belt. It was just kind of that kind of thing. And I think for me personally, as a coach, do I see people that have trouble like focusing on the belts? Absolutely. From doing all the videos, like I get messages, every day about someone saying like, something about a belt. But for me, it's like, the belts are good. They're mile markers. but like, I think that I'm kind of an intangible person. Like, I'm just kind of like up in the clouds somewhere sometimes. And I think that because of that, like, I don't need like the goal. Like the goals become like, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to hit some arm bars today. That's my goal. Or I'm going to go to the gym 5 days this week. That's my goal. Or I'm going to get ready for this competition. That's my goal. I focus on things that I can actually control rather than the things that I can't. Like I can't control when someone gives me a belt. That's their decision, not mine. And so when I was a white belt, I just never cared about belts, and I never thought I was going to get a belt anyway. I mean, I suck so bad. I was like, I'm never going to get maybe I get a blue belt, but I'm never getting a purple belt. And like black belt, like I didn't know they existed anywhere. Like, you knew they were out there somewhere, but you couldn't find any around where I lived. So it was just off the table. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to train and have fun. And obviously I did this unconsciously. I didn't have a conscious thought about it, but I just didn't think about belts that much. And I think that was helpful because it allowed me to just focus on training more so. But as far as people getting focused on belts, they absolutely focus on belts too much sometimes. Not everyone, but some people do. And I think that, for me as a coach, when I watch people, the people that focus the least on belts do the best because they're not, you know what I mean? Like they're chasing the things that they can do that day rather than the things that, that's like a 1 to 2, maybe sometimes 3-year investment. Like that's such a hard thing to chase. Like that's a long-term goal. Like let it be out there somewhere in the back of your mind, but you should be focusing on like, what can I do today? Like what can I do today to make things happen later on? Like what can you do to improve yourself today? I mean, like you're feeling a little tired today after work. Maybe I won't go to class. Get your ass to class. Like that's part of the process, right? It's like the day-to-day things, not the long-term stuff. So
yeah.
I think I rattled off there some stuff, but
it's good to know this because as a student, it's one of those things myself. It's like I don't want a belt any quicker than I deserve it, and the idea of a belt makes you good is not true. Your true skill, your true belt is your skill.
Yeah.
I mean that's really all there is to it. But it's nice for it to be recognized.
Well, sure, it's nice to be recognized by your coaches and people you respect and care about. And the belt is I've talked about this before. It doesn't mean anything, but it means everything at the same time. You know what I mean? So I mean, it doesn't mean anything if you didn't go through the journey to get the damn thing. And that's the thing that people like. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to shortcut the journey that you went through because everybody, I think that does jiu-jitsu long enough. I mean, and you're a lifetime martial artist. I think you'll agree with this. You probably got into martial arts for one reason. And you went on this sort of like there was an external goal that you were going after. Maybe you wanted this belt. Maybe you wanted this ability to fight, whatever that might have been. And then on the surface, that was that. But then beneath the surface, there was this inner thing going on where you were growing as a person, developing as a person, changing your mindset as a person. And, you would never have wanted to, like looking back at it, you would never want to sacrifice that inner part that came because of the long, arduous journey you had to go through. And so for people, it's like, you want to embrace that because it's part of it. And that's the way that you grow. And I think that, jiu-jitsu is different than say a traditional martial art where you talk about, sometimes, and I don't mean this in any disrespect towards traditional martial arts, but a lot of times, jiu-jitsu is it's a lot more freeform, a lot more relaxed. Like a lot of times it feels almost like a wrestling practice where you BS with your buddies for a little bit, then you train hard. But those lessons that are all there in traditional martial arts, they're still in jiu-jitsu. They're sort of covered up beneath the surface, and we don't talk about them very openly, but they're still there. You know what I mean? Like learning how to stay disciplined because you train hard because you want something. You learn the discipline from putting in the hard work on the mats to achieve the competition goal or the belt goal, whatever that is. And then you learn how to, deal with stress and how to just dig deep and find out who you are because someone puts a lot of pressure on your face when you're on the mat, and you have to deal with it, right? Like they're all there. You just have to find them, and you don't want to, I don't even know what I was talking about, but you don't want to sacrifice the, you don't want to sacrifice the inner for the outer just so you can wrap some piece of dyed cotton around your waist, right?
Right.
So
it doesn't, you can buy a belt offline and wear it. It doesn't make you a purple belt or a black belt or whatever, it doesn't.
It doesn't all you want to.
It doesn't make you that, I'm sure we've all seen that video about that fake black belt in that gym that got called out. That would have been,
God, there's so many of them now, man. Like,
oh yeah. Totally.
I feel like every few months they find another one, some guy that's posing, and you're like, and I like that self-regulatory sort of, system that jiu-jitsu has where you're like, all right, man, I'm going to go to your gym. You want to roll or you want to do this? And that's the cool thing about jiu-jitsu is it's not based upon where you see these weird martial arts sometimes, like where's the one that's going around right now, like China, where this guy's touching people and they're all like flopping around and stuff. You know what I mean? Like jiu-jitsu is based in it's based into a reality form. It's like there are games that we play like rolling, which maybe aren't the most realistic for every situation, but it's still steeped in a reality situation where I'm actually doing this to someone that's actually resisting. They're not just sort of going with it because they're brainwashed.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about like how your game develops over well, personally.
Sure.
But like I'm interested because I'm noticing now that that I'm actually focusing on different things that I focused on before, particularly in rolling. Of course, in white belt, it's a lot of just learning the techniques,
Right.
and I really think that's the base of white belt. The base of white belt is just, okay, can you do a proper armbar? Can you do a proper triangle? Can you do a proper hip escape? Can you do a proper, it's not quite the, I talked about this with Roy Dean. It's like learning words or learning an alphabet.
Sure.
When you get to purple belt, you should be able to put together sentences.
Mm-hmm.
So as I'm developing my sentences, it's just like I'm already noticing that my game is changing a little bit. It's just like I used to do this a lot, and now I kind of don't do that anymore. I'm starting to do this more.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that develops how's that developed for you personally as you've gone through from white belt to black belt?
Well, from white belt to early purple, I had a bit of a challenged vocabulary, if we're using the word analogy. Okay. For me, as from white belt, obviously, I think about it as, and this is the way it was for me, you're just learning to survive. You're learning the techniques, you're learning the rules, the way things played, and you're just learning how to stay in the match. And towards the end of white belt, that's when you start to be able to mount some offense. As a blue belt, it's when you start to all right, I don't get smashed every time I walk in the gym. I got a little bit of a buffer of skill between me and some of the other people. Let me start to try some of this stuff out and see what I'm really good with, besides just having to hang on for dear life. And I think that's what you're going through, where you're like, okay, you can sort of go down rabbit holes. You can be like, hey man, this position seems to really work for me, or this particular submission works for me, or whatever. And then I think that that's where it leads to purple belt, which is then you have these little facets of your game where you can really start to refine who you're going to become, and you can almost set the foundation for what you're going to build later on. You know what I mean? And then from there, you start to refine it as a brown belt, and then as black belt, you just start over. It's like, I forgot the musician's name, but there was a musician that said something like, it was, you study, you learn how to play music for years and years and years, and then you eventually just forget how to play music so you can actually play music. And that's kind of what it is as black belt. You learn all this stuff along the way, and then once you're there, it's kind of like, okay, now just do jiu-jitsu. That's where you start to become really creative. I mean, you can become creative before then, but you see obviously this explosion of creativity at the black belt level because you know the rules so well subconsciously, and you just you can play around with so many different things, and there's no pressure for the next belt. There's no pressure for any of that stuff. You're just like, I'm going to try stuff.
You
can go in all sorts of different directions.
Yeah, I've noticed that the creativity. I certainly am not there with jiu-jitsu as of yet. I'm still just kind of exploring what kind of a jiu-jitsu fighter I am.
Right.
And even in exploring that, there are certain things where I'll get in a certain situation, and I've noticed that I have go-to moves that are high percentage moves for me.
You're developing your A game, yeah.
Yeah, for instance, I have an easier time going from half guard to mount than I do from side control to mount personally. Sure. But that might
slide the knee up the middle.
What's that?
Like when you say going from half guard to mount, you mean sliding the knee up the middle to take mount?
Yeah. Well, what I'll do, and I've developed this, and I'm not saying it works on everybody, but it's a high percentage move. Sure. If I'm in side control. Mm-hmm. I'm fighting to put that leg over, or fighting for, a Kimura or something like that.
Right.
And it doesn't really work for me. But if I'm in side control and I let them get me in half guard, I have this really great game that I play. And that is knee to arm. I go from the arm, they start focusing on the arm. I push the knee down, pull my knee up.
Go right up.
Then they start focusing on the knee. Well, then I start focusing on the arm. Right. And and I will either get mount or Kimura. So that's been like one of those things that I've developed that I'm like, okay, this works for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been kind of my, an A part of my A game. But at the same time, it's just like when it doesn't work for me, I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like that's my A game. If that one doesn't work on somebody who's more skilled against me, so it's like you have an A game, but at some point you got to develop your B game as well, and you never know, because your B game might end up becoming your A game in the future.
Yeah, it depends on how you develop it, and you got to stick to actually playing it and trying it. And you'll with your A game it'll keep evolving. Like let's say for instance right now you've got your Kimura and you've got your mount set up. That might end up being like one of your best weapons from now until you become a black belt, and you might end up just having this long series of options from there. Like even as a black belt, it's funny. I was doing some videos for a series that I have coming up, and I was taking all my matches as a black belt and I'm doing narrated, sort of showing people what I'm doing during the matches. And it was so funny because I was doing the same damn position for like 75% of them, and I've been doing this position since I was a blue belt, you know what I mean? But it just got tighter and tighter and tighter. And I remember watching, and I did these videos for like a couple of days, and I was watching the way that I placed my body and where my elbow positioning was. And it was funny because over this course of 4 years, 5 years, or whatever these matches were, I saw just little incremental changes, little adjustments, you know what I mean? And you're like, oh, wow, like it's the same position, same game. It just got a little bit better, a little bit more refined.
Yeah, yeah. So, just one of those things, you just learn that perspective, and then you develop that perspective, and then you're open to changes later on if they avail themselves to you. And one of the reasons I bring this up is because I very much came into jiu-jitsu with my game for the most part, with the exception of what I was just saying, was very defensive. It was very defensive because I came into it with a lot of already ideas about martial arts in general, and that is I'm more of a stand-up person. If I get taken to the ground, that's kind of a backup system for me.
Right.
But that has impacted my jiu-jitsu. So I'm always thinking about, how do I get out of this? I was always thinking that, how do I get out of this? How do I get out? And I developed some good things out of it. So for example, one of the things, like if I'm in guard, I will let somebody lay a triangle on me because I have a really great triangle escape that I've developed, and I can get to side control easier from a triangle. Just personally speaking, easier from a triangle, probably not against a black belt, but my basic, maybe a purple belt to a high blue belt or to a high white belt, kind of that range, then I can out of guard. But it was a defensive posture. It was a defensive kind of a thing. I wasn't laying on arm bars. I wasn't laying on triangles myself. It always was a matter of okay, if I get to the ground, what do I do?
Yeah.
And it just occurred to me, I'm cheating myself out of jiu-jitsu. I need to start being more, instead of being defensive, I need to start being more like, okay, how can I get the Kimura? How can I get the triangle? How can I get the sweep? How can I get the, you know what I mean? So
right, that's a mindset change. I mean, it's the same reason, or same way that I came into jiu-jitsu as a wrestler who was like, I don't want to play from my back. I don't want to play guard. I'm not doing that. Like if someone would get me in guard, I would just find a way to kick away from them and stand back up. And then, there was a point where I went to a seminar and I saw some really cool guard sweeps because I don't know, I wasn't very good at triangles and arm bars off the bat, but I started playing with a lot of sweeps. And I went to the seminar and they showed the sweeps, and I remember, well, that's cool. It's a way for me to get on top from the bottom, and it stuck. And then it changed my game because my mindset changed. Just like, you went from being I'm a jiu-jitsu guy second, I'm a stand-up guy first. And so you have this mindset, and then you're like, well, screw it. If I'm going to do this, I just need to be all in 100% and just, let my game go where it needs to be, instead of having this preconceived notion of what I'm supposed to be or where it's supposed to go.
Right. Now, you had a video that you put out, I think it was recently, I'm not sure, but it came out almost about the same time, a video that I did, kind of a vlog that I did.
Okay.
And you were talking about people using this excuse in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I know what it is.
And you were talking about the attribute of strength.
Sure.
And I hear this a lot from me because I'm kind of a bigger guy. I'm naturally strong. and people kind of mistake what I do for strength. And sometimes it is. I mean, I will be totally honest with you. I have, if there's a lighter person and they're on top of me in side control, I have,
Yeah.
just basically bench press them into my guard kind of a thing. I mean,
Right.
I've done that before. I'm not saying it's the best plan in the world. Of course, it's not going to work with somebody who's stronger,
Hmm.
but it's an attribute. Now, there are some times where people don't understand what I'm doing because I do a lot of Chisao, and because of Chisao, I'm able to feel breakdowns in weakness over a short distance. So as
What's
we're
Chisao?
that's the Wing Chun Chisao
Oh,
where
the,
you
the
sit.
thing, the thing where they're like
Yeah,
doing this.
yeah.
I still get it.
So
I have no clue. So I'm in here at the kitchen, like doing this. So,
well, basically the idea is that you're feeling weaknesses around the other person where they're weak, and so you can kind of feel where they're offline, and you can develop hand sensitivity. It's
sensitivity.
very
Yeah.
much, yeah, it's a sensitivity thing. So like I have the ability to kind of put people's hands down to the mat fairly
Uh-huh.
easily.
Sure.
And it's not strength. People think it's strength, but it's
Right.
not. I'm just feeling where they're weak, and exploiting that weakness down to where their hands are on the mat. But I do use strength. It is
Right.
an attribute that I have, and people have said to me things like, "Oh, you won that because of strength," and I'm like, I get pissed off about that. I'm like, well, yeah, but I don't say to you, "Oh, you won that because you're flexible."
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, it's funny. Like, um, the cheese salad thing, that's interesting because you'll develop that same. I'll get on the strong thing real fast, but it's interesting that the cheese salad thing you're talking about, the sensitivity, you get that same sensitivity in jiu-jitsu. Like there's times where you'll feel someone do something and you'll just adjust to it because you feel that their body's weak on one side or their base is off on one side, and you'll just do something. That's cool. So, but as far as the flexibility thing, yeah, I mean, like that's just people just a lot of times, again, it goes back to the ego where people don't like to lose. And so instead of saying, you know what, man, my game needs some work against this particular type of attribute, it's far easier just to say, you know what, like you're strong and that's the reason why you won. And that's just, to me, that's just a big cop out.
Yeah, it is. It is a big cop out because there's lots of attributes that I don't have. I'm not. I'm very blocky type of body shape, and so I don't have a lot of like natural speed. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? I have to work on developing my speed. And I've been in matches where, or rolling with somebody where somebody will just quickly lay on like an armbar from the bottom. You know what I mean? They just have that natural whoo, and they're light, and they're quick, and they're flexible, and I don't have that. And it's not fair. It would be equally unfair for me to say, well, you laid that armbar on because you're flexible and quick.
Right. Because you're
You
fast,
know?
flexible, and cool. Well, and to me, it's like, what if you're in a situation at a tournament or if you're in a situation in a fight and some big, strong, fast, whatever person comes up to you? You can't say, hey, man, will you not use your speed or flexibility or whatever the hell whatever attribute you have? You have to learn how to deal with it, and so I think that, you do your partners, as long as you're safe, right? You do your partners a disservice by not using the attributes that they have. And I think that you do yourself a disservice by just simply equating your loss to someone's attribute. You know what I mean? Like you need to prepare for those things and you need to be able to deal with them.
Right. Right. Um, so a couple last questions that I want to ask you about, and that is because you did a video on learning jujitsu from home.
Mm.
So talk a little bit about that, because I did that like between my gyms when the Gracie School that was here kind of closed down. I went ahead and got the DVDs, and I felt like I learned a lot from them, but I also felt like there was a lot I needed to learn from an actual coach as well. So what's your opinion on learning from home, as opposed to learning from a coach?
Yeah. When you did the DVs, how did you practice them? Did you have like partners to do it with? Did you kind of watch a little bit? Like,
I went through partners because there was a lot of people who who would do it for a little while with me, then they would fall out. So a lot of it was just watching them. I would watch them. So, but I did, when I could, find somebody who wanted to
Sure.
do the combatives with me to, you know.
Right.
So it was a bit of
A little bit
both.
of both. Yeah. And so that's what, like, oftentimes for me, like, it's so, as far as like how to train from home, like, so I kind of got off because I was thinking about how you were training at home. And then so I'm thinking about like this. What was the question again?
Well, what are the pros and cons? Is it a good idea? I mean, if you to train from home, if you have
Okay.
no other option, or do you think it's always better to train with the coach, or what's your take
Okay.
on learning from home,
I
learning
mean, I
from
think it's
TV?
always better to train with a coach. I mean, it's just in the sense that, again, you can definitely train from home and you can get skill, but you're going to move at a snail's pace, right? Because it just is, it's like anything else, man. Like, if for instance, if I wanted to get good at something, I would hire a coach to tell me how to do things, right? So I can get better at it. Like, because I know that they are going to go through the same pitfalls that I'm going to run into, so they can help me bounce over those a little bit faster. And, with the coach, you go in there and they're going to basically help you, sort of avoid some of the problems that they had, or at least try to, and you're going to have a much faster road. And there's going to be structure to it. You can have structure in DVD series, but again, it's on you to sort of maintain that structure. When you go into a coach, it's like you should have structure, and you'll have people telling you how to do things. And, another thing that I see from people is it's like those at-home workout videos, right? Like, good luck. Like, our minds, so we typically have such an association with places where, like, this is my place of rest, this is where I do this, that, whatever. And so unless you have a dedicated place to be your gym, a lot of times it's very hard to like change it up. You know what I mean? Like, it's very hard to like turn your living room, that's your place of rest, into your training area. Right. Like, I mean,
Right.
if you have a big garage, it might be okay, but and then consistent training partners, like, that's hard to come by, like you had in your experience. And I think that ultimately, to me, the jujitsu, like when I started training jujitsu, I wanted the skill, I wanted the abilities that I got from jujitsu. And then as I've trained more and more, one of the just as important things that have come through it is the experience, and it's the community that I'm a part of and the people that I've met. And those things, like, if you have the ability to train at a good school, it's so worth it. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I know it's more expensive than, say, like a regular gym membership where you go like work out or whatever. Man, it's so worth it, because it's game changing, it's life changing. And I
Right.
think that, to not be a part of that, you're selling yourself short. You might be able to, even if you could get the skill that you could get at a gym by yourself or with a friend, I think that you miss out on the whole experience of being a part of a gym where you're a part of something bigger than yourself. And so I think that
Mhm.
people should always train. As far as now, there is a time where I think training at home is helpful, and that's where, if you're already training under a coach and you want to, like, say, listen, like, I have a good student of mine, Nick Pavone, and he actually has a mat room in his home. And I've gone over there a couple times, and a few other guys, they'll go over and train here and there. And he has like a DVD and a TV set up in the room, and he has his mats there, and he'll, go through DVDs or videos or whatever, and he'll practice and he'll drill, and he'll come into the gym later on that week and he'll use them against people. And that was the way that I used them. I would use the DVDs where I would use them and train with them, or with a friend of mine who lived with me. We would do the moves, and then we would go into the gym and actually try them. And I think that's a great use for them. But I think just doing them by yourself solo, if that's all you got, that's all you have. But if you have the ability to train at
It's
the gym, I think you should.
it's better than nothing, right? It's better
It's better than
than if
nothing.
Yeah, yeah, but it's certainly not optimal, and I'd have to agree. I've learned so much more, training with the coach. It really was a plan B. It was really a matter of, well, I want to know these things,
Right.
and of course, having a martial arts background, it was a little bit different for me, because I kind of already know how my body moves. I already know,
Mhm.
how to do certain things. So it was I kind of pick up on things a little bit easier. If you were just a beginner at
Yeah.
everything and didn't know, it would be even more difficult.
Sure,
um,
because you knew what it was like to go from like a beginner in, like, a martial art, and then have to train yourself with repetitions and whatever else to improve. And so by getting into it, then you kind of knew what you were in for, and you knew, kind of, at least had some sort of roadmap on how to improve.
right. So final question, and I'll let you go. And want to be respectful of your time, but I always ask this to all our guests, and that is, what are your top three training methods and or fighting tips. You can either do fighting tips or training methods depending upon, like what it is, whatever you like. Okay. So if you're to pass on three things, your top three fighting tips, training methods to the audience, what would it be?
Let's see. We'll do some, I guess it'd be more of a training methods or training tips. First one would be, as far as jiu-jitsu, because that's what we've been talking about. That's what I have expertise in. Drill more than you because people, they know that they need to drill, but a lot of times they don't. Like that, because when I mean drilling, I'm talking about like reps. I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of reps, doing them in increasingly fast. And there are, there's other versions of active drilling and things like that, but making sure that you really work on getting quality time and position, because those are the things that I've noticed as I've gotten better. I can decrease my overall training volume down a little bit, like my harder training, and I can increase my ability doing like active drilling, and I get way more out of myself than I was if I was just rolling all the time. And I know that it's not fun because sometimes it's very monotonous and it's repetitive, but man, it makes such a huge difference on your game. It's like broccoli, right? Like nobody likes to eat broccoli, you know what I mean? But when you have to go to the doctor and get your blood work done and everything's like looking good, you're like, well, I'm glad I ate my broccoli. And your game will reflect that. If you go in and get hundreds and hundreds of reps of the move that you're trying to hit, and all of a sudden it starts popping up in your game effortlessly, you'll be like, I'm really glad I did those 1,000 reps of that particular arm bar or something. Another tip, I guess, would be to listen to your body. Jiu-jitsu oftentimes does not have like a season to it. And, people just train like crazy. They just go after it constantly, especially young guys, young men and women. And it's very important to listen to your body. When you need to rest, you need to rest. And as Americans, I feel like we're all just like, gotta go. And I think sometimes you need to take a step back, where you can let your body rest, one, so you don't get injured, so you can stay on the mat more consistently, but also so that you can get more out of yourself when you come back. I feel like people, they don't honor their body in the sense of, getting rest when it needs to rest. They just want to train more. And then a last training tip. Gosh, there's so many things you could go down the list with. I would say that keep an open mind. And I say this because I think there's going to be constantly new moves and new things that are going to evolve over the years. And I've seen so many people in jiu-jitsu, they get locked into someone's dogma, right? Like they say that I'm only going to train in the gi, or I'm only going to train in the no gi, or I'm only using this type of position, or I'm not going to use these types of moves. And they get locked into something, not because they personally came to that realization themselves, but rather that they sort of bought what someone else told them. And now they've held on to this idea of just for sheer consistency. Like, right, it's the way that my instructor did it, so I guess it's the way I'm supposed to do it, or that's the way that my students are going to do it. And I think it's really important to always keep an open mind. And as you grow, constantly, be open to the idea. And if you run into something where like a position or a move or something, or some young guy, starts to show some new thing in a tournament, be open to the idea. And if you find that you're kind of resistant to it, question yourself a little bit. Like, why are you resistant to it? Or are you resistant to it just because it's new? Or do you really have a problem with it? Because again, just like the leg lock things, a lot of people are resistant to leg locks, and they don't really have a good reason. It's like, you'll say, well, why are you resistant to them? Because they're dangerous. How many people have you seen get hurt by them? Your own eyes? Like, well, none. But like, okay, well, then you got to give me something, like you got to be, because jiu-jitsu can constantly evolve, and you don't want to you don't want to be left behind.
Right.
So,
all right. Well, thank you for that. And tell everyone where they can find you online.
Probably the easiest place is the YouTube channel. Just search up Jiu-Jitsu, you'll find the YouTube channel. And I've also got all kinds of stuff that go on, my website, like some different series and things like that aren't going to be released in YouTube. And that's jiujitsu.net, because .com was taken years ago. And and I guess that's it.
Chewjitsu.com was taken?
Jiu-jitsu.com was taken. Yeah. So originally it was like a food critic website. So it was called Chewjitsu. And, the domain's like, they want I guess they're sitting on the domain now. They want some money for it. And I'm like, maybe at some point,
I see. All right. Well, thank you for joining me today. If you don't mind, just hang on for a quick minute afterwards.
Yeah,
I'm going to
absolutely.
go ahead and close out the show and just hang on for 1 minute. I just would like to talk with you a little bit afterwards.
Absolutely.
Hey, thanks for everybody joining me on the Empty Cup podcast. If you like what you heard, do me a favor and share this on your favorite social media. That's one of the biggest things you can do to help me is to share this on your favorite social media. Also, go to iTunes and please write a review, write an honest review, but any review helps. And you can follow us on Facebook at Facebook.com/ the Empty Cup Podcast and on Twitter at Empty Cup Podcast. And if you're looking for other vlogs and other training tips and things like that, check out my YouTube channel, Ronin JKD. That's Ronin JKD. And I update that quite a bit where I go through different training methods and, basically teach JKD, Wing Chun, groundwork, all kinds of stuff that I talk about and we do on that channel. So thank you. And until we meet again, please keep your gloves up.